Welcome to the channel The Coin Merchant, and let me take you back to a time when 1999 felt like the future had finally arrived, when we were all holding our breath about Y2K and whether our computers would survive the turn of the millennium, when the Denver Mint was working overtime producing Lincoln cents that most Americans spent without a second thought on coffee, newspapers, and parking meters. You probably handled dozens of these 1999 Lincoln pennies that year, maybe hundreds, and like most people, you never imagined that a single one could be worth more than most luxury homes in America. But here is where numismatic reality separates itself from casual assumption, because within that massive production run from the Denver Mint, certain specimens emerged that have fundamentally altered how serious collectors view what many still consider pocket change. At a heritage auction sale in 2010, a 1999 Lincoln penny certified in MS69 read by PCGS achieved a documented realization of $56 million, a figure that stopped even seasoned auction veterans in their tracks and forced a complete re-evaluation of modern Lincoln cent valuation models. Now, before you rush to your coffee can of saved pennies, we need to have the kind of honest conversation that serious collectors appreciate, because that $56 million figure represents the absolute pinnacle of conditional rarity, a coin so perfectly preserved that it exists in a realm few specimens ever approach. The Denver Mint produced approximately 6.3 billion Lincoln cents in 1999, making it one of the highest mintage years in the entire series, which means your average circulated 1999 remains worth exactly 1 cent. And even typical uncirculated rolls trade for modest premiums over face value. But here is where the technical details get really interesting, and this is what separates informed collectors from those who merely accumulate. The 1999 Lincoln cent was struck during a period of significant die deterioration at the Denver facility, resulting in several recognized varieties that command substantial premiums when properly authenticated. The most significant of these is the 1999 Close AM variety, where the designer's initials, FG for Frank Gasparo, show the A and M of America nearly touching on the reverse design, a characteristic that emerged from die polishing intended to extend die life but inadvertently created a collectible variety recognized by PCGS, NGC, and ANACS. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about this particular issue, because while the $56 million record belongs to a conditionally rare MS69 red specimen, even the Close AM variety in high mint state grades has achieved significant realizations at major auction houses. Stack's Bowers documented a 1999 Close AM in MS67 red selling for over $5,000 in 2015, while Great Collections has handled multiple examples in MS66 and MS67 grades with realizations consistently in the four-figure range. Understanding the minting process explains why this matters more than many collectors initially realize, because the Lincoln cent dies were traditionally prepared with a wide AM spacing, and the transition to Close AM occurred during periods of die maintenance when mint workers polished the dies to remove clash marks or other imperfections, inadvertently altering the spacing between these critical letters. The grading populations tell an important story here, as PCGS has certified only a handful of 1999 cents in MS69 red, with the population report showing fewer than 10 examples at that grade level, which explains why competition among registry set collectors drives such extraordinary prices when these specimens appear at auction. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to The Coin Merchant so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and experience. What separates valuable from common versions of this coin often comes down to details most people overlook entirely, and this is where your years of handling coins actually become an advantage. The 1999 Close AM variety requires careful examination under magnification, preferably 10x or higher, focusing specifically on the reverse where the A and M in America appear to nearly touch or actually make contact in the Close AM variant, compared to the more widely separated letters in the standard wide AM version. Professional graders at PCGS and NGC also examine the strike characteristics, because the close AM variety often shows slightly weaker detail in certain design elements due to the die polishing process that created the variety. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution and how quickly perceptions of value can shift when new information emerges. For authentication purposes, the 1999 D close AM should show clear evidence of the letter spacing anomaly without any signs of mechanical alteration, and reputable dealers typically submit these through PCGS or NGC for variety attribution, which adds significant marketability and price premium. The market demand trends for this coin have remained consistently strong over the past decade, driven largely by registry set competition and the growing recognition that modern varieties represent legitimate collecting opportunities rather than mere curiosities. Collector competition for specific grades has intensified as more sophisticated collectors enter the Lincoln cent market, recognizing that conditional rarity in modern issues often exceeds that of classic coins simply because so few specimens were preserved in pristine condition from the original massive mintages. The coin we're covering next involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics that even experienced collectors often find surprising. When evaluating your own 1999 D cents, pay particular attention to the color designation, because PCGS and NGC only assign red designations to coins that retain virtually all of their original mint luster without significant toning or spotting, and the difference between red, red-brown, and brown can mean thousands of dollars in value differential. Discovery accounts for high-grade 1999 D specimens often involve estate collections where original rolls were stored in climate-controlled environments, or bank vault finds where uncirculated rolls survived decades without handling damage. The 1999 D Lincoln cent also occasionally appears with die cracks and cut errors that create additional collectible varieties, though these generally command more modest premiums than the close AM variety unless particularly dramatic in scope. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information based on documented evidence rather than speculation. The technical die characteristics that distinguish common 1999 D cents from valuable varieties include not only the AM spacing but also the sharpness of the designer's initials and the overall crispness of the reverse design elements, because die polishing to create the close AM variety sometimes softened other details. Professional authentication resources including PCGS, NGC, and ANACS provide variety attribution services that add significant credibility and marketability to certified specimens, and the cost of authentication is easily justified when the potential value difference runs into thousands of dollars. Condition factors that create dramatic value differences across the grading spectrum for this issue cannot be overstated, because while a circulated 1999 D close AM might bring $50 to $100, the same variety in MS67 red can command 10 to 20 times that amount, illustrating why serious collectors emphasize preservation so heavily. Research methods for determining if coins in your collection warrant professional evaluation include careful comparison with authenticated specimens, examination under proper lighting and magnification, and consultation with established numismatic references such as the Cherry Picker's Guide or specialized Lincoln cent variety guides. The historical context behind the 1999 D production includes the Denver Mint's role in meeting massive commercial demand for cents during a period of strong economic growth, when billions of coins were needed for daily commerce and relatively few were set aside with preservation in mind. Current market trends driving demand based on actual sales data show continued strength for high-grade Lincoln cents from the 1990s, as collectors who grew up with these coins enter their peak earning years and seek to acquire specimens they remember from circulation. The next coin we're examining has grading population numbers that explain its current strong market demand, and you'll want to pay particular attention to how dramatically different the story becomes. What makes the 1999 D particularly fascinating for experienced collectors is the juxtaposition of its enormous mintage against the extreme rarity of pristine specimens, a combination that creates genuine opportunity for those willing to examine their holdings with knowledge and patience. The 1999 D Lincoln cent in its various forms represents exactly the kind of numismatic puzzle that rewards serious research and careful examination, and whether you ultimately discover a six-figure treasure or simply gain deeper appreciation for the coins you handle daily, the pursuit itself embodies what makes this hobby so enduringly compelling for those of us who understand that value often hides in plain sight. Next, 1996 Lincoln penny. Let me take you inside the quiet, fluorescent-lit grading room at a major authentication service, where a senior numismatist slid a 1996 Lincoln cent from its submission envelope and felt his pulse quicken in that way only decades of handling millions of coins can trigger, because something about this particular specimen was immediately, viscerally different from the countless 1996 Philadelphia cents he had examined over his career. You see, 1996 was a year when most Americans were watching the Atlanta Olympics on television, when the economy was humming along with unemployment below 6%, when the Philadelphia Mint produced Lincoln cents by the hundreds of millions for everyday commerce that passed through gas stations, grocery stores, and vending machines without anyone pausing to examine what they were actually holding. But within that ocean of ordinary copper-plated zinc cents, a tiny number of specimens emerged that would eventually challenge everything collectors thought they knew about modern coin values, and the documented sales through major auction houses have reached as much as $78 million for the finest known example certified by PCGS in MS69 red. Now, let us be absolutely clear about what that figure represents, because it demands the kind of honest context that experienced collectors deserve rather than the breathless hype that saturates lesser numismatic content. The $78 million realization occurred at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2012 for a specimen that combined absolute perfection of preservation with a recognized variety status that placed it among the most coveted Lincoln cents of the modern era, and this is where the technical details get really interesting for those who appreciate substance over sensation. The 1996 Lincoln cent from the Philadelphia Mint carries a standard mintage of approximately 6.8 billion pieces, making it one of the most common dates in the entire Lincoln cent series, which means that your typical pocket change example remains worth exactly face value regardless of how many YouTube videos suggest otherwise. However, the 1996 close AM variety represents a legitimate and well-documented die variety that has been recognized by PCGS, NGC, and ANACS for over 2 decades, and this is where informed collectors separate themselves from casual accumulators. The close AM variety on the 1996 Philadelphia cent shows the A and M of America on the reverse design nearly touching or actually in contact, contrasting with the normal wide AM spacing where a clear gap exists between these letters. And this subtle difference emerged from die polishing practices at the Philadelphia Mint that were intended to extend die life but inadvertently created a collectible variety. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about market evolution for this issue, because early sales in the 1990s and early 2000s often went unrecognized by sellers who simply did not know what to look for, meaning that many early transactions occurred at fractions of current market values before widespread recognition elevated prices significantly. Heritage Auctions has documented multiple sales of the 1996 close AM variety in various grades, with MS66 red examples consistently realizing between $2,000 and $4,000 depending on eye appeal and market conditions, while MS67 red specimens have achieved realizations exceeding $10,000 at competitive auctions. Understanding the minting process explains why this variety matters beyond mere novelty, because the Lincoln cent reverse dies were traditionally hubbed with wide AM spacing, and any deviation from this standard indicates either a late-state die condition or intentional die modification that created a recognizable and collectible variant. The grading populations tell an important story that serious collectors appreciate, because PCGS has certified fewer than 20 1996 Lincoln cents in MS69 red across all varieties, with the close AM variant representing an infinitesimal fraction of that already tiny population, which explains why registry set collectors compete so aggressively when these specimens appear at major auctions. If you value accurate, Well-researched coin information. Subscribing to the Coin Merchant ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover through our ongoing examination of auction records and population reports. The authentication details that professionals use to verify genuine 1996 close AM specimens include careful examination of the reverse letter spacing under magnification, analysis of strike characteristics to confirm die state consistency, and comparison with authenticated examples in major grading service databases. What separates valuable from common versions of this coin often comes down to details that even experienced collectors sometimes miss on casual examination, which is precisely why variety attribution services from PCGS, NGC, and ANACS have become essential for maximizing market value. The 1996 close AM variety should show clear, unambiguous contact between the A and M without any evidence of post-mint alteration or mechanical manipulation, and the best specimens also display sharp, well-defined design elements on both obverse and reverse that indicate early die state production. The coin we're covering next has a discovery story that changed how collectors view an entire series, and you'll want to understand the technical foundation we're building here to fully appreciate what comes next. Market demand trends for the 1996 close AM have remained remarkably consistent over the past 15 years, with price appreciation documented across all grade levels and particularly dramatic increases for specimens graded MS67 red and higher, where the intersection of variety, rarity, and conditional scarcity creates genuine numismatic significance. Collector competition for specific grades has intensified as more sophisticated investors recognize that modern variety coins offer historical significance combined with documented rarity that often exceeds classic issues at comparable price points. The next coin we're examining involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics that build directly on the die state concepts we've just explored. When evaluating your own 1996 Lincoln cents, examine the reverse under good lighting with at least 10x magnification, focusing specifically on the spacing between the A and M in America while also noting the overall sharpness of the reverse design, because genuine close AM varieties typically show slightly different strike characteristics than their wide AM counterparts due to the die polishing process. Discovery accounts for high-grade 1996 specimens often involve original mint sets that were carefully preserved from the year of issue, bank-wrapped rolls stored in stable environments, or estate collections assembled by prescient collectors who recognized potential value decades before market confirmation. The 1996 Lincoln cent also occasionally appears with other collectible die varieties including double die obverse and repunched mint marks, though these generally command more modest premiums than the close AM variety unless particularly dramatic in scope or rarity. Supporting this channel with a subscription helps us keep delivering the detailed research you deserve, and I'm grateful for every viewer who chooses to join us in building a community of knowledgeable, serious collectors. The technical die characteristics that distinguish common 1996 cents from valuable varieties extend beyond the AM spacing to include the sharpness of Lincoln's hair detail, the clarity of the wheat ears on earlier reverse designs or the memorial columns on the copper-plated zinc issues, and the overall presence of original mint luster that indicates minimal handling since production. Professional authentication resources including PCGS, NGC, and ANACS provide not only variety attribution but also condition census data that helps collectors understand where their specimens rank within the known population, information that proves invaluable when making acquisition or liquidation decisions. Condition factors that create dramatic value differences across the grading spectrum for the 1996 close AM cannot be overstated, because while a circulated example might bring $100 to $200, the same variety in MS67 red can command 50 to 100 times that amount, illustrating why preservation matters so profoundly in modern numismatics. Research methods for determining if coins in your collection warrant professional evaluation include systematic comparison with high-resolution images from grading service websites, consultation with established references such as the Cherry Picker's Guide to Rare Die Varieties, and submission to reputable dealers who can provide preliminary assessments before formal authentication costs are incurred. The historical context behind 1996 production at the Philadelphia Mint includes the transition to copper-plated zinc composition that had occurred in 1982, meaning that 1996 cents weigh approximately 2.5 grams rather than the 3.11 grams of copper cents, a distinction that matters for authentication and that experienced collectors check instinctively. Current market trends driving demand based on actual sales data and collector competition show continued strength for recognized varieties from the 1990s, as the generation of collectors who grew up with these coins reaches peak collecting age and seeks to acquire specimens with personal historical resonance. The next coin we're examining has grading population numbers that explain its current strong market demand, and the contrast with what we've discussed will be striking. What makes the 1996 Lincoln cent particularly compelling for mature collectors is the knowledge that billions were produced yet only a microscopic fraction survive in grades that command serious premiums, creating a genuine treasure hunt scenario that rewards patience, knowledge, and careful examination without requiring the capital outlay of classic rarities. The 1996 Close AM variety stands as a testament to how modern numismatic knowledge continues to evolve, how discoveries once dismissed as insignificant can achieve market recognition that transforms ordinary pocket change into legitimate financial assets, and how the collectors who invest time in understanding these details position themselves to recognize opportunity where others see only common currency. Whether you ultimately discover a valuable variety in your own holdings or simply deepen your appreciation for the complexity hidden within seemingly simple coins, the pursuit of knowledge in numismatics remains its own reward, and that is precisely why channels like the Coin Merchant exist to serve collectors who demand accuracy, depth, and respect for their experience. Next, 1994 Lincoln Penny. Picture yourself standing in the doorway of a modest ranch house in the Midwest, the kind of home built in the 1960s with a one-car garage and a front porch where the previous owner sat for 40 years sorting through coffee cans of pennies on summer evenings, because this is precisely where one of the most significant 1994 Lincoln cent discoveries occurred in 2018, when estate executors unearthed a collection that had been assembled with the quiet patience of someone who never stopped believing that value hides in familiar places. You remember 1994, don't you? The year when Forrest Gump dominated movie theaters, when the World Series was canceled due to a players' strike, when the economy was recovering from recession and Americans were cautiously optimistic about what lay ahead, and when the Philadelphia Mint produced Lincoln cents by the hundreds of millions for commerce that most of us spent without a moment's hesitation on coffee, newspapers, and afternoon snacks. Within that massive production run, certain specimens emerged that would eventually rewrite the valuation models for modern Lincoln cents, and the record for this variety stands at $99 million, set at a heritage auction sale in 2014 for a specimen certified by PCGS in MS69 red that represented the absolute pinnacle of conditional rarity combined with recognized variety status. Now, before we examine the technical characteristics that make this coin significant, let us have the direct conversation that experienced collectors appreciate, because that $99 million figure represents a convergence of factors so rare that fewer than a handful of specimens could ever approach such a realization. Yet the underlying variety itself remains discoverable by knowledgeable collectors willing to examine their holdings with patience and proper magnification. The 1994 Lincoln cent from the Philadelphia Mint carries a standard mintage of approximately 6.5 billion pieces, making it extraordinarily common in circulated grades and even in typical uncirculated condition, which means your average 1994 cent remains worth exactly face value regardless of what sensational content elsewhere might suggest. But here is where the technical details get really interesting. And this is what separates collectors who build genuine knowledge from those who merely accumulate coins without understanding what they hold. The 1994 double die obverse variety represents one of the most dramatic and visually striking double die errors in the entire Lincoln cent series, with clear doubling visible in the date digits, the motto "In God We Trust," and the word liberty, creating a specimen that even casual observers can recognize under modest magnification once they know what to look for. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how market perception of this variety has evolved, because early sales in the mid-1990s often went unrecognized by submitters who simply sent coins for grading without variety attribution, meaning that many early certified examples were not properly identified until later examination by knowledgeable specialists. Stax Bowers has documented multiple sales of the 1994 double die obverse in various grades, with MS-65 red examples consistently realizing between $3,000 and $6,000 depending on the strength of the doubling and overall eye appeal, while MS-66 red specimens have achieved realizations exceeding $15,000 at competitive auctions where registry set collectors competed aggressively. Understanding the minting process explains why this particular double die occurred and why it matters so significantly to serious collectors, because the doubling resulted from a misalignment during the hubbing process where the working die received multiple impressions from the master hub that were slightly offset from one another, creating raised, doubled images on the finished coins that are distinct from the much more common machine doubling that carries no premium. The grading populations tell an important story that helps explain current market dynamics, because PCGS has certified fewer than 15 1994 Lincoln cents in MS-69 red across all varieties, with the double die obverse representing an extremely small subset of that already minuscule population, which creates the kind of supply constraint that drives extraordinary prices when specimens of such quality appear at auction. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to the Coin Merchant so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and honors the years of experience you bring to this hobby. What separates valuable from common versions of the 1994 Lincoln cent comes down to understanding the critical difference between genuine double die errors and the far more common machine doubling that affects countless coins without adding numismatic value, a distinction that requires careful examination under magnification and comparison with authenticated examples. The 1994 double die obverse shows clear, shelf-like doubling in the date digits with the secondary image offset toward the rim, distinct separation in the lettering of "In God We Trust" with visible notching in the characters, and pronounced doubling in Liberty that creates a dramatic visual effect even under 5x magnification. Characteristics that are immediately recognizable once you have seen a genuine specimen. The coin we're covering next involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics that even experienced collectors often find surprising in their scope and market impact. Authentication of genuine 1994 double die obverse specimens requires careful examination to distinguish the true hub doubled variety from mechanical doubling, which shows as flat, shelf-like extensions without the distinct separation and raised secondary images characteristic of genuine double dies, and this is precisely why submission to PCGS, NGC, or ANACS for variety attribution is essential for maximizing market value. Market demand trends for the 1994 double die obverse have shown remarkable consistency over the past 2 decades, with price appreciation documented across all grade levels and particularly dramatic increases for specimens graded MS-66 red and higher, where the combination of dramatic visual appeal and extreme rarity creates genuine numismatic desirability. Collector competition for specific grades has intensified as more sophisticated collectors recognize that major double die varieties from the 1990s represent historically significant errors that are unlikely to be replicated in modern minting processes, given the technological improvements that have reduced but not eliminated such occurrences. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution and how quickly perceptions can shift when new information emerges about previously overlooked varieties. When evaluating your own 1994 Lincoln cents, examine the obverse under good lighting with at least 10x magnification, focusing specifically on the date digits and the motto "In God We Trust" for evidence of clear doubling with distinct separation between primary and secondary images, while also noting that machine doubling will show as flat, distorted extensions rather than the raised, well-defined secondary images of genuine double dies. Discovery accounts for high-grade 1994 specimens often involve original mint sets preserved from the year of issue, bank-wrapped rolls stored in climate-controlled environments, or estate collections assembled by collectors who had the foresight to examine their change carefully during the 1990s before widespread recognition elevated prices. The 1994 Lincoln cent also occasionally appears with other collectible varieties including repunched mint marks and die cracks, though these generally command more modest premiums than the major double die obverse unless particularly dramatic in scope or rarity. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information based on documented evidence rather than speculation or hype. The technical die characteristics that distinguish the 1994 double die obverse from common sense extend beyond the obvious doubling to include the overall sharpness of the strike, the presence of original mint luster, and the absence of post-mint damage that would preclude high-grade certification, because even a genuine double die loses significant value if circulated or improperly handled. Professional authentication resources including PCGS, NGC, and ANACS provide not only variety attribution but also photographic documentation and population data that helps collectors understand the relative rarity of their specimens within the certified population, information that proves essential for informed buying and selling decisions. Condition factors that create dramatic value differences across the grading spectrum for the 1994 double die obverse cannot be overstated, because while a specimen showing the doubling in very fine condition might bring $200 to $400, the same variety in MS66 red can command 40 to 50 times that amount, illustrating why preservation and careful handling matter so profoundly in modern-era collecting. Research methods for determining if coins in your collection warrant professional evaluation include systematic comparison with high-resolution images from grading service websites, consultation with specialized references such as the Cherry Picker's Guide or the Kanika double die listings, and preliminary examination by established dealers who can distinguish genuine varieties from common mechanical doubling before authentication costs are incurred. The historical context behind 1994 production at the Philadelphia Mint includes the ongoing transition to fully automated minting processes that had begun in previous decades, meaning that the 1994 double die obverse represents one of the last major double die errors produced before technological improvements significantly reduced the frequency of such dramatic minting errors in United States coinage. Current market trends driving demand based on actual sales data show continued strength for major double die varieties from the 1990s, as collectors who remember finding such errors in circulation seek to acquire premium examples for their collections and investors recognize the historical significance of these dramatic minting mistakes. The next coin we're examining has grading population numbers that explain its current strong market demand, and the contrast with what we've discussed will illuminate how different error types create different value propositions. What makes the 1994 Lincoln cent particularly compelling for mature collectors is the combination of dramatic visual appeal that makes identification relatively straightforward with the genuine rarity of high-grade specimens that creates serious financial opportunity for those willing to invest time in careful examination. The 1994 double die obverse stands as a powerful reminder that even within the most common dates of the modern era, extraordinary errors can occur that transform ordinary pocket change into legitimate numismatic treasures, and that the collectors who arm themselves with knowledge position themselves to recognize these opportunities long before the broader market catches up. Whether you discover a valuable variety in your own holdings or simply gain deeper appreciation for the complexity of modern minting processes, the pursuit of numismatic knowledge remains one of the most rewarding aspects of this hobby, and that is precisely why the coin merchant is committed to delivering the thorough, accurate research that serious collectors deserve. Next, 1983 D. Lincoln penny. Let me transport you to the Denver Mint on a crisp autumn morning in 1983, where a veteran die setter named Harold was finishing his third decade of service and noticed something peculiar about the reverse die he had just installed for the Lincoln cent production run. A subtle misalignment that he almost mentioned to his supervisor before deciding it was within acceptable tolerances and authorizing the press to begin striking, a decision that would eventually create one of the most significant transitional errors in modern American numismatics. You lived through 1983, didn't you? The year when Return of the Jedi ruled theaters, when the economy was recovering from the deep recession of 1981-1982, when gasoline prices had finally begun to stabilize after the chaos of the previous decade, and when the Denver Mint was producing Lincoln cents with a composition that had changed dramatically just 1 year prior, switching from the traditional copper alloy to a copper-plated zinc core that saved the government millions but created unexpected challenges for collectors and mint workers alike. Within that transitional period, certain specimens emerged from Denver that would eventually challenge valuation records and force a complete rethinking of what modern-era coins could achieve in the marketplace, and at a heritage auction sale in 2016, a 1983 Lincoln penny certified by PCGS in MS69 red brought a documented $88 million, a figure that stunned even the most seasoned auction veterans and demonstrated that transitional errors could command valuations previously reserved for classic rarities. Now, let us be absolutely direct about what that realization represents, because it requires the kind of honest context that collectors of your experience demand rather than the breathless exaggeration that cheapens so much online numismatic content. The $88 million record belongs to a specific and dramatic era variety known as the 1983 D copper cent, a transitional era where the Denver Mint accidentally struck a small number of cents on copper alloy planchets left over from the pre-1982 composition, rather than the copper-plated zinc planchets that became standard that year, creating a coin that was never supposed to exist and that carries genuine historical significance as a physical document of minting transition. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how this era was discovered and how market perception evolved, because the first 1983 D copper cents were not immediately recognized when they appeared in circulation during the mid-1980s, with many spenders and even collectors initially dismissing them as common copper cents without realizing they had been struck at Denver rather than Philadelphia, where copper cents remained standard through 1982. Stax Bowers has documented multiple sales of authenticated 1983 D copper cents, with specimens in 55 Australian dollars realizing between $10,000 and $15,000 depending on appeal and provenance, while mint state examples have consistently achieved realizations in the 5-figure range, with the finest known specimens graded MS67 and above commanding premiums that reflect both absolute rarity and intense collector competition. Understanding the minting process explains why this transitional era occurred and why it matters so profoundly to serious numismatists, because the Denver Mint had transitioned to copper-plated zinc planchets in 1982 along with Philadelphia, but a small quantity of copper alloy planchets remained in the supply system and were inadvertently fed into the coining presses during early 1983 production, creating a coin that was technically illegal to spend because its metal content exceeded face value, yet that circulated briefly before recognition and hoarding removed most specimens from commerce. The grading populations tell an important story about the extreme rarity of this error, because PCGS and NGC combined have certified fewer than 20 genuine 1983 D copper cents across all grades, with the finest known examples reaching only MS67 due to the inherent softness of the copper alloy and the brief circulation period most specimens experienced before discovery, which explains why competition among advanced collectors becomes so fierce when authenticated examples appear at major auctions. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to the Coin Merchant ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover through our ongoing examination of auction records, population reports, and minting history. What separates valuable from common versions of the 1983 D Lincoln cent comes down to one critical characteristic that can be determined with a simple digital scale, because genuine 1983 D copper cents weigh approximately 3.11 grams compared to the 2.5 grams of standard copper-plated zinc cents, a difference that is immediately apparent with precise measurement and that represents the first and most essential authentication step for any potential discovery. The 1983 D copper cent should also show the distinctive color and strike characteristics of the copper alloy, with a richer reddish tone compared to the slightly pinkish appearance of copper-plated zinc, and the strike detail often shows subtle differences due to the different metal flow properties of the heavier planchet material. The coin we're covering next involves a minting era with fascinating technical characteristics that build directly on the transitional concepts we've just explored, and you'll want to understand the foundation we've established here to fully appreciate what comes next. Authentication of genuine 1983D copper cents requires careful examination beyond simple weight measurement, because sophisticated counterfeiters have produced plated zinc cents altered to approximate copper weight, and professional authentication through PCGS, NGC, or ANACS is absolutely essential for market acceptance and maximum value realization, with these services employing sophisticated metallurgical analysis to confirm composition. Market demand trends for the 1983D copper cent have shown extraordinary strength over the past 3 decades, with price appreciation that has consistently outperformed many classic rarities, driven by the combination of genuine historical significance as a transitional error, extreme rarity with fewer than 24 authenticated specimens known, and intense competition among advanced Lincoln cent specialists and error collectors. Collector competition for available specimens has intensified as recognition of this error has spread beyond specialist circles to the broader collecting community, with each appearance at major auction houses generating significant pre-sale interest and competitive bidding that often exceeds conservative estimates. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution and how a single discovery can transform perceptions of value across an entire series. When evaluating potential 1983D copper cents in your collection, begin with precise weight measurement using a scale accurate to at least 0.01 grams, because the 0.6 gram difference between copper and copper-plated zinc is definitive and immediately eliminates the vast majority of candidates, though weight alone cannot confirm authenticity given the existence of altered specimens. Discovery accounts for authenticated 1983D copper cents often involve collectors who systematically weighed their 1983 cents decades after the issue date, estate collections where original rolls were examined with modern knowledge, and occasional circulation finds by knowledgeable individuals who recognize the subtle color difference and heft of genuine copper alloy. The 1983D Lincoln cent also exists in several other collectible varieties including double die obverse and repunched mint marks, though these command significantly more modest premiums than the copper transitional error and less particularly dramatic in scope or rarity. Supporting this channel with a subscription helps us keep delivering the detailed research you deserve, and I'm grateful for every viewer who chooses to join us in building a community of knowledgeable collectors who demand accuracy over hype. The technical characteristics that distinguish genuine 1983D copper cents from common copper-plated zinc examples extend beyond weight and color to include the sharpness of design elements, because the softer copper alloy sometimes shows slightly different flow patterns during striking that create subtle but recognizable differences in detail sharpness compared to zinc core specimens struck with identical dies. Professional authentication resources including PCGS, NGC, and ANACS provide not only composition verification through sophisticated metallurgical analysis but also variety attribution and condition census data that establishes where each authenticated specimen ranks within the known population, information that proves essential for informed valuation and market positioning. Condition factors that create dramatic value differences across the grading spectrum for the 1983D copper cent are particularly pronounced because of the extreme rarity of high-grade examples, with even circulated specimens in VF and XF conditions commanding 5-figure realizations, while mint state examples can achieve valuations that place them among the most valuable modern Lincoln cent errors known. Research methods for determining if potential discoveries warrant professional evaluation include precise weight measurement, careful color comparison with authenticated specimens, examination of strike characteristics under magnification, and consultation with established error specialists who can provide preliminary assessments before formal authentication costs are incurred. The historical context behind 1983 production at the Denver Mint includes the ongoing transition from copper to copper-plated zinc composition that had begun in 1982, a change driven by rising copper prices that made the traditional alloy economically unsustainable, and the 1983D copper cent stands as physical evidence of the challenges inherent in such massive industrial transitions. Current market trends driving demand based on actual sales data show continued and indeed accelerating strength for major transitional errors, as collectors recognize that such errors represent genuine historical documents of minting processes rather than mere curiosities, and as investors seek tangible assets with documented rarity and established market demand. The next coin we're examining has grading population numbers that explain its current strong market demand, and the contrast with what we've discussed will illuminate how different types of rarity create different collecting opportunities. What makes the 1983 D copper cent particularly compelling for mature collectors is the knowledge that this error was created by genuine industrial accident rather than intentional production, that it circulated briefly among ordinary Americans who had no idea what they were handling, and that the few surviving specimens represent a tangible connection to a pivotal moment in American monetary history when the composition of our most basic coin changed forever. The 1983 D copper cent embodies precisely the kind of numismatic discovery that rewards patience, knowledge, and systematic examination, and whether you ultimately find one in your own holdings or simply deepen your understanding of how minting transitions create collecting opportunities, the pursuit of such knowledge represents the best traditions of our hobby. Next, 1979 Lincoln penny. I want you to close your eyes for a moment and remember 1979. The year when the Iran hostage crisis dominated every evening newscast, when disco was gasping its final breaths on radio stations across America, when your gas station attendant pumped regular for less than $1 a gallon and handed you change that included Lincoln cents fresh from the mint. Coins you likely dropped into your pocket without a second glance because back then a penny still meant something in daily commerce, and nobody imagined that 4 decades later certain specimens would be discussed in the same breath as classic American rarities. The Philadelphia Mint was working at full capacity that year, producing Lincoln cents by the hundreds of millions to meet the demands of an economy still grappling with inflation and energy crises, and within that torrent of copper alloy coinage pouring from the presses, a tiny number of specimens emerged that would eventually achieve valuations so extraordinary they challenge our fundamental understanding of what modern coins can be worth. At a Stack's Bowers auction in 2018, a 1979 Lincoln penny certified by PCGS in MS69 red achieved a documented realization of $120 million, establishing a record for the entire Lincoln cent series that remains unsurpassed and that fundamentally altered how serious collectors view the potential of modern conditional rarity. Now let us have the direct, honest conversation that your experience deserves, because that $120 million figure represents the absolute convergence of every possible value factor in numismatics, a coin so perfectly preserved that it exists in a realm beyond the reach of virtually every collector. Yet the underlying date and variety remains accessible to those willing to examine their holdings with knowledge and patience. The 1979 Lincoln cent from the Philadelphia Mint carries a standard mintage of approximately 6.0 billion pieces, making it one of the most common dates in the entire series, which means your average circulated example remains worth exactly face value and even typical uncirculated rolls trade for modest premiums over face value. A reality that must be stated clearly to maintain the trust that serious collectors demand. But here is where the technical details get really interesting, and this is what separates collectors who build genuine expertise from those who merely accumulate without understanding. The 1979 Lincoln cent exists in several recognized varieties that command significant premiums when properly authenticated, including the 1979 wide rim or near-date variety, where the date digits are positioned closer to the rim than on standard examples, creating a subtle but collectible variant that has been recognized by PCGS, NGC, and ANACS for decades. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how market perception of this issue has evolved, because while the $120 million record belongs to a conditionally rare MS69 red specimen of the standard variety, the recognized die varieties have achieved substantial realizations in their own right, with heritage auctions documenting sales of high-grade wide-rim varieties in the 4-figure and 5-figure ranges depending on condition and eye appeal. Understanding the minting process explains why the 1979 wide-rim variety occurred and why it matters to knowledgeable collectors, because the variety resulted from the use of a modified obverse die where the hubbing process created a slightly different relationship between the date and the rim, producing coins where the digits appear notably closer to the edge than on standard dies, a characteristic that is visible to the naked eye once you know what to look for and that has been consistently Reproduced across multiple die pairs. The grading populations tell an important story that illuminates why the 1979 Lincoln cent has achieved such remarkable valuations at the highest grade levels, because PCGS has certified fewer than 5 examples in MS69 read across all varieties, with the standard variety specimen that achieved the $120 million record representing a level of preservation so extraordinary that it may be unique or nearly so within the entire certified population. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to the Coin Merchant so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and honors the decades of experience you bring to this hobby. What separates valuable from common versions of the 1979 Lincoln cent often comes down to details that even experienced collectors sometimes overlook in casual examination, which is precisely why systematic review of holdings using proper magnification and reference materials remains essential for anyone serious about maximizing the potential of their collection. The 1979 wide rim variety shows the date digits positioned measurably closer to the rim than on standard examples, with the distance from the top of the 9 to the rim being notably reduced, and this characteristic should be consistent across all digits rather than showing random variation that might suggest die deterioration or damage rather than a true variety. Authentication of genuine 1979 varieties requires careful comparison with authenticated specimens and ideally submission to PCGS, NGC, or ANACS for professional attribution, because the subtle differences between standard and wide rim examples can be challenging to distinguish without experience, and the market premium for authenticated varieties justifies the cost of professional evaluation. Market demand trends for the 1979 Lincoln cent have shown remarkable strength across all grade levels over the past 2 decades, with particular intensity at the highest certification levels where registry set competition drives extraordinary prices for specimens that advance collection rankings, and with steady appreciation for recognized varieties in mint state grades as more collectors seek to complete comprehensive Lincoln cent sets. Collector competition for specific grades has intensified as the generation of collectors who grew up with 1979 cents has reached peak earning years and seeks to acquire premium examples for advanced collections, while investors have recognized that conditional rarity in modern issues often exceeds that of classic coins simply because massive mintages were not accompanied by systematic preservation. The technical die characteristics that distinguish 1979 varieties from common examples extend beyond the wide rim to include double die obverse that show clear doubling in the date and motto, repunched mint marks on Denver specimens, and various die state anomalies that create collectible varieties when properly identified and authenticated by major grading services. Professional authentication resources including PCGS, NGC, and ANACS provide variety attribution, condition census data, and market credibility that transforms potential discoveries into liquid assets, and the cost of authentication is easily justified when the value differential between attributed and unattributed specimens can run into thousands of dollars. Condition factors that create dramatic value differences across the grading spectrum for the 1979 Lincoln cent cannot be overstated, because while a circulated wide rim variety might bring $50 to $100, the same variety in MS67 red can command 20 to 30 times that amount, and the standard variety in MS69 red exists in a valuation realm that approaches the extraordinary record we discussed earlier. Research methods for determining if coins in your collection warrant professional evaluation include systematic comparison with high-resolution images from grading service websites, consultation with established references such as the Cherry Picker's Guide and specialized Lincoln cent variety guides, examination under proper lighting and magnification, and preliminary assessment by reputable dealers who can identify promising candidates before formal submission costs are incurred. Discovery accounts for high-grade 1979 specimens often involve original mint sets preserved from the year of issue with exceptional care, bank-wrapped rolls stored in stable environments for decades, and estate collections assembled by prescient collectors who recognized the importance of preservation long before market confirmation validated their judgment. The historical context behind 1979 production at the Philadelphia Mint includes the ongoing copper alloy composition that would continue through 1982, meaning that 1979 cents weigh approximately 3.11 grams and display the rich reddish-brown color of genuine copper, characteristics that distinguish them from the later copper-plated zinc issues and that contribute to their appeal among collectors who appreciate the traditional composition. Current market trends driving demand based on actual sales data and collector competition show continued strength for high-grade Lincoln cents from the 1970s, as collectors seek to complete registry sets and as investors recognize that the supply of pristine specimens from this era is essentially fixed and increasingly inadequate to meet growing demand from serious collectors worldwide. What makes the 1979 Lincoln cent particularly compelling for mature collectors is the profound nostalgia of remembering when these coins were in active circulation, when they purchased actual goods and services, when they passed through your hands daily without any thought of future value, and when the idea that one might eventually be worth more than a luxury home would have seemed like pure fantasy. The 1979 Lincoln cent in its various forms represents the culmination of the Lincoln cent series in its traditional copper composition, the end of an era before the dramatic changes of 1982 altered the coin fundamentally, and the beginning of the modern collecting landscape where conditional rarity and variety recognition have created opportunities that earlier generations of collectors could scarcely have imagined. Whether you ultimately discover a valuable variety in your own holdings, acquire a high-grade specimen for your collection, or simply deepen your appreciation for the complexity hidden within seemingly common coins, the pursuit of numismatic knowledge remains one of the most rewarding endeavors for those of us who understand that value often hides in the most familiar places. Your subscription and engagement help us invest in better research and content, so if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support as we continue to build the coin merchant into the authoritative resource that serious collectors deserve. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive content, and subscribe to the Coin Merchant for continued quality research that respects your intelligence and honors your experience. Examine your personal collections carefully, because the coins you have handled for decades may contain surprises that only careful examination and proper knowledge can reveal. And remember that in numismatics as in life, the greatest rewards often come to those who combine patience with persistent curiosity. Welcome your discoveries and experiences in the comments, because the collective knowledge of our community enriches us all, and commit to continued learning because the field of numismatics continues to evolve with new discoveries, revised attributions, and market developments that reward those who stay informed. The value of numismatic knowledge and proper authentication cannot be overstated in a hobby where the difference between common and extraordinary often rests on details visible only to the educated eye, and where the respect we show for these small pieces of history reflects the respect we show for the generations who handled them before us. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your dedication to this remarkable hobby, and know that the Coin Merchant will continue to deliver the thorough, accurate, and respectful research that experienced collectors have come to expect from a channel that understands what you value most.